Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. And thank you very much for being a co host here on the channel. I really appreciate it. So, here on RPG with DBJ, we like to talk about all things tabletop role playing games. And I thought this week it would be a good idea to rewind the clock a little bit and go back to some of these very common um, uh, tabletop role playing community concepts that come up very, very often. And one of them, a top one, a top fiver, is a something that is very cyclical, and especially with new players coming into the fold, and Dungeons and Dragons and other role playing games becoming very expansive throughout the hobby community and further on is the idea of fudging dice. Well, what is fudging dice? Fudging dice as a descriptor, as a definition, for my opinion, is that after the dice are rolled, these polyhedral randomizers are rolled on the table, or of course we do have digital dice as well. After they are rolled, we change the outcome or ignore the outcome of the dice to have a more to have an outcome that is more in line with what we expect rather than the randomization of the dice. Now, one of the issues about that happens. Hey there, Jason Melton. Hey there, howdy as well. Welcome. You will not be alone. Hopefully, the glad to see you over there on Twitch. We do broadcast over multiple platforms: Twitch, YouTube. The audio gets punched out to Discord, Facebook, that kind of thing. So glad to have you here. So uh, to finish out my preamble, fudging dice, I believe, also accounts for where maybe the dice aren't rolled at this particular moment, but on the fly, usually on the dungeon master side or game master side, we are changing the parameters of the game on the fly as it happens to achieve a different result. One concept in that, and sometimes has been offered as a solution to things, are changing armor classes, especially ranking up and down hit points for a lot of our adversaries. And this usually happens on the DM's side. That's my producer. What the heck's going on here? Come on, Kitty. Come on, Sophie. Soph. I know if you want to take part in the show, you can come over here. Sorry about that. Okay. Lastly, fudging dice may involve changing the parameters of the rules in an extremely dramatic way. Again, to achieve a particular desired result. The reason why I say not to come about the best result is that the group at the table, or maybe one single individual at the table, doesn't like the end result of these randomizers. And so we want to fudge the dice. We want to go, oh, wow, Dungeon Master, I just rolled dice and I crit killed one of the player characters in the very first round of combat. Let's change that. So I contend that before we even get to the point of fudging dice, maybe there's a couple things we some skills, some techniques, some things that we can learn, stick into our belt. Me being, an old groggy, an old grognard, old graybeard, and maybe if we have some of these skills under our belt, that it will reduce our tendency to want to default to the dice aren't telling the story that I want at the time. Maybe there's some other things that we can do in the interim. So, all right, that's my preamble. So, and there's going to be some honorable mentions here, of course, from you guys as well. But if I can come up with some terms or phrases for about 5 things I think we can learn before we even start considering fudging the dice. I'm not a person. I personally feel like die rolls are sacrosanct. I feel like they are immutable. If you're going to bother rolling the dice, then accept the fates. We've gone to the casino and we've pulled the arm of the one armed bandit. you've dropped cash into the machine. There's no going back. And so that's how I think of it. Hey, Harry's like, I'm third. Alley says one way to make someone jump out their seat, lay some camouflage D4s on their seat. Don't tell me you did that to yourself. That's very bizarre. That's very bizarre. Here we go. Mufa says hit points are the only thing I tend to fudge mid-combat, usually just to cover up my own mistake of making an encounter far too weak. I dislike messing with die rolls, and we're going to get into that too. The messing with hit points and things of that nature. It's weird because I have an internal code of conduct. I don't actually mess with hit points and maybe some other things on the fly, but let's get into it. All right, so my 5, these are my skills, and of course I guarantee you guys have done these things to one extent or another. You may not have called it these things, and I guarantee that you guys know or do other things besides the 5 I'm going to list. But let's get into it. Okay, so the first one is scaled die rolls, and I'll get into describing what they are, and then you guys might go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. All right, so the first one is scaled die rolls. My second is dials in the narrative, not actual, it's figurative dials that you can turn in the narrative. So scaled die roll number 1, scaled die rolls number 1, being able to scale successes or failures. Number 2 is dials in the narrative. Number 3 are no locked doors. Number 4 is embrace the dice. And number 5 is don't roll. Okay. So what do I mean by all these? All right, the first one is the scaled die roll, and you guys know, especially for the newcomers, chime in anytime. Chime in. All right, so Alley Oops mentions never change the hit points on the fly; they stay as is or maxed before game. Absolutely, and I actually do that, and it's an internal, like I said, it's an internal code that I use. I understand the need to want to alter hit points on the fly because we want to have a tabletop experience that is something happens in most role playing games, and that is you have more players and more actions than you have for your bad guys. And usually when you have singular or less bad guys or adversaries for your players, they go Nova, right? All the players they have the capability, and especially the way initiative has been embraced now than when I started back in the late 70s and early 80s, that one side of the table goes all at once, and then the GM side of the table goes. And so, of course, players just go Nova. And you're expecting to have, for example, a big Titanic battle with a demon lord and their minions, or a dragon and their enslaved, giants or whatever. And the combat's probably going to end in a single round, 2 rounds or something. And in our heads, we're like, man, this should have extended out much longer. That's why patches have been made, like legendary actions. Now there's mythic actions and so on. And I contend that there's just a little something to do a little bit before that. All right, so Deadman says a DM I gamed with in the early aughts did the fudge the hit point thing with one boss monster. We would have killed the boss in less than 2 rounds if he hadn't. And yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, that's a thing. Yeah. A_nerd says, I mostly scale hit points if things are dragging. I'm fine with my players taking a beating, but if it turns out they just hit a big damage sponge that's not nearly as fun to fight as I imagined, I'll be fine with making the sponge die a bit earlier. Yeah, and actually maybe I'll let a monster. I will admit, I have to reconsider about not fudging hit points. I will let a monster go, especially if they're minions or minion like, and they've got like 1 hit point, or like a dangling hit point or two, I'll let him go. I'll let him go. All right, Pelora says, I do love scaled die rolls, especially on knowledge checks. You can set the critical information as automatic and give extra bits as the roll goes up. Yep, that's exactly where we're going with that. Exactly. Let's see. Harry says, champions is an example of too complicated. Of too complicated. Do you mean like a CR system or a crit system? Champions. Oh my god. Talk about a game that makes you learn fractions. Yeah. Original Champions, man, I dog-eared the heck out of my Champions book. I can't believe I even played that game, but I love it. Alley-oop says, sometimes I'll roll a check to see if they're still standing after that crit damage to give the NPCs a chance. Yeah, it's true. All right, so Pelor says, and yeah, I fudge hit points all the time. And when a fight is winding down, I tend to just let the PCs win cinematically rather than spending 15 minutes rolling against two nearly dead goblins. I do that. I will do that. But we'll get into this other thing. Deadman mentions option B for hit points. Use a round counter, and all damage done before that goes off is negated, so the monster lasts longer. I hadn't thought of, that's different. I thought about that. Oh, combat resolution system. Yeah, I don't. I'm terrible with acronyms. Yeah, the champions. Oof. Roll a ton of d6s. Okay, now certain d6s mean this. Plus, you add certain ones together, and then also it's not just bludgeoning damage or stunning damage. There's also lethal damage in it. Yeah, yeah. It makes sense, but you're just like, what? Okay, so. All right. So here are some of my definitions, and let's see if you guys understand what I'm saying. Although Pelora actually literally let's go back to her comment. Yep. Okay. So scaled die rolls. Sometimes knowledge, history, investigation. These are usually mental die rolls, observational die rolls, watcher, vigilant style die rolls, and a scaled die roll means that we have accepted that there is a minimum of success. And what we're doing is we're rolling the dice and we're going to give out information or allowing the players to progress based on the success of that die roll. And while we understand there's no failure in the die roll, what we're doing mentally is sure, unless they crit, someone rolls a crit one or a critical fumble, we are basically going to give the players a minimum of information. Maybe they come into a city of thieves and you just let them know you see pickpockets, hiding or people hiding in the shadows, or you come into a city state and everyone's got their hoods up and they've got their eyes cast down and they're scurrying back and forth with fear in their eyes. Boom, you've just given them the information. You didn't make them roll an insight check. You didn't have them. You just said, here's the minimum information. And depending on how high the die roll is, I'm going to give out even more information. Maybe the way people act, or they dress, or they overhear a conversation, or someone they notice an individual they went to school with or from their old village or something like that. Maybe the PCs go into an old crypt and there's an ancient language. Maybe you decide that the smartest character knows what the language means, or there's something historical in there. They notice the dust slowly swirling on the ground and that air is blowing between a crack between the wall and the floor, and the PCs are like, secret door, right? That kind of thing. So you're scaling the die roll. And in this way, this relates actually to something else that one of the skills is I call no locked doors. And that is we want forward progression in our game. And so when we place maybe a specific piece of information behind an NPC, or there literally is a locked door we expect the PCs to go through, when we roll the dice and the dice don't tell the story we want, then we become stuck. Oh man, they didn't convince the NPC to get that information. How do I get the information to the player characters? Well, how about we just make it a foregone conclusion? Now, for Dungeons and Dragons, there really isn't, when you roll the D20, usually Dungeons and Dragons defaults to a pass fail. Like if the DC is a 10 and you roll an 11 through 19, normally it doesn't matter what you roll between that. But there's an exception to that. If you take a look at the of all things the Medusa as a monster, there is this scaled success and failure. So if you fail the saving throw against a Medusa by 5 or more, you turn to stone. Otherwise, if it's between 1 to 4 as a failed saving throw, you're just restrained as you slowly start to turn. And I think we can expand that out to darn near every die roll if you want to, especially when it comes to like investigation and learning clues and detective work and history and knowledge and arcana checks. That sure, maybe if the DC is 12 and you rolled a 13, okay, you get a little bit of information. If you rolled a 17 or 18, a 19, we're going to give you more information stuff. Alley Oops mentions giving small clues for low rolls, more for high rolls. Yeah, it sucks to be stuck. Oh, listen. I can talk out the side of my neck all I want about what the best thing to do is. Shit, I catch myself doing that more often than a little bit in my own head. Like, oh, why did I even bother? Now, here's something else that players about scaled die rolls. Here's something that players tend to do that you might want to dissuade them from doing, and that is stopping players from making die rolls to preempt the dungeon master, right? So in other words, here's an example. Hey, all right, players, you've just defeated the monster. You wedge the door open. Dust spills out. Cobwebs stretch and they snap as the door opens up into the darkness. You step inside the room. Your eyes adjusting to the darkness. Many of you, more than half of you with your dark vision. The one behind with their torch. And a player goes, but before the description's even done, I roll a perception check. Roll, right? And you as a dungeon master are like, why did you do that? You didn't. I was going to give you the information, but now that you rolled a 2 on your perception check, and I really don't want to change die rolls, now I literally have to cut you off at the knees for doing a thing I didn't ask you to do in the first place. In other words, players, don't roll the dice unless the dungeon master asks you and the game master asks you, because you actually might put yourself in a position that the dungeon master now has to embrace in the narrative that they didn't intend to in the first place, right? Maybe that NPC was going to always tell you about the hidden layer beneath their shop because they want the players to help them get out of a gambling debt or something like that. And they've got weapons and swords. Maybe they'll stick around and they'll scare away the bad guys that are extorting them. But the player decided to make a charisma persuasion check and rolled the dice and screwed it up. So scaling die rolls. Someone rolls a middling roll. We do the yes and no but. Like, yes, you succeed, but it's going to take you longer to find that book in the library. Oh man, you rolled a low roll. Well, you know what? You're going to find the clue, but unfortunately, the rain started and those tracks out into the woods. Yeah, the rain started to make the tracks go away. So they ran off into the woods, but you're not going to be able to follow them. That kind of thing. All right. So the second one is, and this has a lot to do with the combat dynamic, raising hit points, allowing a monster to continue on, and I'm calling this dials in the narrative, not dialing like as an active dial, but putting dials in the narrative. Okay. Co-host Alley Oop says, "Yep, you just shot yourself in the foot for making anticipated rolls uncalled for." Oh hell yeah, Players, a lot of players do that all the time, and I'm not going to blame them for being like wrong. Sometimes it's excitement. Sometimes it's just like ooh, 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 and we get top headed as players. Top headed. I mean, we're looking down at our character sheet or our digital phone or something. Digital character sheet on our phone, and we get top headed. We're like, ooh, I've got this capability. I can't wait to use it. But maybe just maybe the dungeon master wants us is willing to use a passive ability. Now, if we actually read the rules, passive perception isn't the only skill. Every skill that every character has is passive if you read the rules. They just mention passive perception because it's used so often, but every skill is passive, which is here's a weirdness. That means that the rules say something that I've been doing for probably 40 years now is an assumed professionalism, meaning like the rogue in the party knows that this city is a city of thieves and there's pickpockets. The fighter knows forensic because they've been in so many battles that when they see dead bodies, they have an idea of what kind of battle this took. Oh, these 8 guards, they were killed by one swordsman, right? Assumed professionalism. And that's going to go to our last thing about don't roll. Okay, so what do I mean by dials in the narrative? A dial in a narrative is a way for us, instead of us anticipating what our players are going to do, this is 99% of the time, this refers to combat. Instead of us anticipating and balancing a combat situation, how about we throw in a dial? And a dial is a way for us to turn down the combat and make it easier, which, let's be honest, we don't have to do that too often, or turn the dial up and make it harder. And when I say dials in the narrative, I mean there should be a logical narrative sense for why our combat is either reducing down and becoming easier and maybe shorter or easier for our players to overcome, or being harder for our players to overcome. Here's an example within the narrative of something happening. The players have encountered 5 ogres out in the woods. All right. And when the players are sneaking through the woods, they hear the encampment of the ogres, and they're arguing. And in the narrative, like there's 1 or 2 of the ogres that are getting smacked around by 3 other ogres. Go get the firewood, smack in the back of the head. Yeah, that's all the firewood you got? Smack one more time. Your little puny thing, punch in the chest, right? What I'm doing here is maybe I'm setting up a reason for the ogres, even though there's 5 of them, for maybe 1 or 2 of them to leave, to go away. All right. Here's another way to dial down if I know the player characters are like, oh, they can't fight 5 ogres. Maybe 1 or 2 of the ogres is like, they crack their knuckles. They're like, these are little puny humans. I can take care of them. And the other 3 are like, I'll sit back. Let me see if you really can take care of them. While the other one's like still poking at the stolen, pig or something from the local village while they put it on the spit. And then the other two ogres are like, yeah, I've been itching for a fight. Maybe there's a reason why, even though there's 5 ogres, some of them leave the combat. Maybe 1 or 2 of them, maybe one's got a horn and runs off and goes and runs off and leaves the combat, but maybe calls for reinforcements, or maybe they've stolen stuff from the local village, and they while the 3 ogres are fighting the party, 2 of them are looking around like, I'm not going to fight. Let me grab all the ill-gotten goods and leave and sneak away or something. Using the narrative to dial down the combat, because this is a thing. Running away, anything from fear, greed, self-preservation, any number of things are reasons why, are many reasons why monsters will want to leave the fight. And maybe the combat wasn't intended to be 2 hours in your game. You thought, oh, it's going to be a random encounter. Damn it, it's getting too long. All right, well, I don't know, mounted riders fly away because they're getting their asses kicked or something, or neither the player characters nor the enemy wanted to get in a fight in the first place, and they're just like, yo, this is called role playing. Hey, time out! Whoa, 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 whoa! Let's all just take it easy. We've got losses on each side. Maybe we can work this out. Okay. No, how do we dial it up? How do we make the combat like last longer, or maybe we thought this was going to be tough, and the player characters are wiping all it takes is one more initiative roll and your bad guy is dead. Like, what do you do? Well, again, let's turn the narrative and turn that dial way up. Calling for reinforcements, having reinforcements is a really good one. You guys know I love using the environment. Have foreshadow the environment being a danger to what's going on, and then here's the moment that the danger does happen. That sandstorm or those dark clouds that were on the horizon, here comes the torrential rain and the high winds and a lightning bolt. Here comes the sandstorm and the slippery sand dunes and the falling rocks on the cliffside. Here are those things using the environment. For monsters, who's to say that those 5 ogres aren't a scouting party and that there are many off into the distance? Maybe they have the party of ogres has, I don't, what are some good monsters? Dire wolves or wargs or something like that as pets that were tied up nearby. And you can foreshadow these things as well. It there's 5 ogres in the camp, but it looks like there's probably many more. You may never need to use that, but if you foreshadow, you leave the details there. Then when reinforcements show up, the players are like, oh, this camp did look like it was much bigger for a larger group. Now here comes the larger group, right? Anything else can be set up to rank the power levels a little bit higher. Like you can stage up a bad guy. This might sound like it's also fudging hit points, but when the bad guy's getting trounced and they consume something, pull out a magic item, they have runes that are marked on their body that tells the players that there's something, they've been marked by some arcane power. Maybe there is what would you say, a you explain that there is a feeling of something that happens within the battlefield that may or may not be in the control of the bad guy in question. For example, maybe a vampire lord is under the command or in service to a lich. So the vampire lord's getting his ass kicked, and suddenly, a dark energy, one that saps the life out of the region or something, sweeps over the region, over the area, and even the vampire lord is kind of like, what's going on? And all of a sudden, maybe I don't know, the vampire lord is rejuvenated as stolen life is given into the vampire and whatnot. And the PCs are like, didn't we just kick his ass? Like, why is he still walking around? But now, narratively, there's a reason when, I don't know, a disembodied voice from the lich or something threatens the player characters, and or the vampire lord makes a comment like, liege lord, thank you so much, turning them into a gaseous cloud and getting them the hell out of there or something of that nature. Right? Let's see. Michael Marin says there are about 3 goblins surrounded by a cluster of 10 tents. Exactly. Now you may never, and what I mean by dials in the narrative, maybe in your mind, you're, as the DM, you're like, you know what? I don't care that there's 3 goblins. Let them wipe the floor with the 3 goblins. Maybe they find some clues in the tents. Who cares? Or maybe you're thinking, yeah, I kind of did want this to be. You know what? Now is a good time to really rank this up. And so now the 3 goblins come out. They fight the PCs. PCs go smack, smack, smack. There's 10 tents. They start poking around, and maybe one of the tents gets ripped out. The stakes get ripped out, and a whole gang of goblins come out, along with 12 orcs or something. They're just like, they start charging at the PCs. They're like, what the hell just happened? And they're like, yeah, and you describe like one of the orcs like pulling up their underwear and stuff because they had like a nightshirt on or something. I mean, you could be pretty, you don't have to be silly with it, but my point being is that we can narratively drop little hints and clues and then use them. For me, is throwing tons of dials in the narrative that I can then go to modify what the hell's going on in the game. And I love using, you guys know I'm the self-appointed third pillarist of the tabletop RPG community. And I say that to say that I love using the environment, and any third person thing that I can throw in to change the dynamic, I love to use. Whether it's crowds of people coming around the corner, again, using the weather quite a bit. If they are in a constructed location, maybe it's an abandoned building, a house fire, runaway horses, migrating animals. It doesn't matter. Any little thing that I can do that I know I can use as a from a narrative tool to a mechanical one to change the dynamic of the outcome, I'll use that. Alley-oops, the orc go on commando with a battle axe. PCs are like, your dingle ding is sticking out. Orc goes from I use axe one-handed now, using the other hand to hide his questionables. All right. Uh, so now we get into the third one. That's no locked doors. This is both this is both real and figurative. So what I mean by no locked doors is, if do not prevent forward progression in your game by putting it behind a die roll. What I mean by that is, we love to have the idea of a magical mystical door locked away with a riddle carved inside of it, and if the players solve the riddle, the door will open and they can get into the dungeon and get into the adventure. That sounds good in a novel, in a book, in a television series, and animated series and graphic novels and whatnot, because as a writer and creator, you can design who solves the riddle. When it comes to the table, you're basing this not on character knowledge but player knowledge. And if that's what it takes to get into your dungeon and the door is locked and they never figure it out, they're stuck. That's a locked door. There's something else about locked doors. Let's say the players need to escape the city, get on a sailing ship, and sail away. And you know that to progress in the game, they need to get on a sailing ship. Then let them get on the ship. Don't make it a die roll. All right, roll to convince the dockmaster to let you on. Oh, crit fail. Dockmaster says, hell no, I'm not letting you onto the docks. I'm keeping I don't know if there's gates locked or something like that. Now the PCs are like, all right, what do we do now? I don't know, right? If you want to give the players a riddle or a puzzle, give it something that they can take with them on a piece of paper. It's a small item or something, and let them figure it out on their way. And maybe there's a set of keys that are supposed to fit into a thing a certain way, but they can put the keys on their hip and keep going into the dungeon. Maybe later on they figure out and they go, I know the answer to that one. And then they have they can figure out the riddle. But don't put a riddle on top of a locked door. Don't expect players to find secret doors that lead them further in, all that kind of stuff. I see you, alley-oops. Alley-oops is like sneak past the dockmaster. Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. Giving them options to solve a problem, or more than one option to solve a problem. Hell's yes. Don't lock that door. Vampanoid says, I'll give a player the last hit with hit points if I feel they need the win, especially if they've been rolling bad but RPing well. Now that's very true. Besides, when I let a player kill something, I'm always like, how do you take out the bad guy, right? Like, you tell me how you did it, and if they're like, blood splattered on my face, I slide the blade into their chest or something. Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Yeah, Mike says, when key villains are killed off too easily, I tend to drop in environmental effects. Cave systems start collapsing. Yep. Minions lose control and become insane. Weather goes nuts. Exactly. And you can rank things up and down too, right? One of those ogres might be feeling a little sick. Maybe that's because that ogre has like the minimum number of hit points, or maybe that ogre is going to vomit up a ooze out of their they chest burst, right? Do an alien chest burst or something. And either of those two options, you might have foreshadowed. Mike says, never place key content behind a roll. It took me a long time to understand this rule. Oh, hell yes. Hell's yes. Don't do it. Don't tie. Sometimes we like to have rumors, and attach them to specific NPCs. Don't even do that. If the PCs never go to the blacksmith, and you made sure the blacksmith has the specific piece of information, don't do that. Just have the information. Have your NPCs. Whenever they get interested in one specific NPC, maybe there's a small little scavenger kid. Maybe there's there's an oracle, or the person serving drinks at the tavern. That's the person that has that piece of information. Don't put it behind a locked door. All right, let's get into the co-host. Pelura says, I don't write walkthroughs for my own games. Nobody can Google the solutions if they get stuck. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if even you don't know, if all you've done is create the problems, which is cool, that's actually a good design element, and you've never created the solutions, then you'll never get stuck, right? Uh, Mike says, also, I will improv keys. I might drop strange geometric objects with a vague magical quality. Yep, exactly. Then the players, being hoarders, keep everything. I'll let that object act as a key for a door. You know what? I do that too. I do that too. Like um, oh, we've defeated the bandits. You find a strange geometric object in their pocket. What is it? Well, it's not magical, but it does seem significant. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know what it means. I don't know. You know? Mike says players love handouts. It means they need to take fewer notes. Yes, they do. Mm-mm-mm. Yep. You guys talking about how to get past the dockmaster. Okay, you couldn't convince him, so you sneak past him, you bribe him, threaten, those kind of things. Don't just go, oh, they're not going to be able to get past it, right? Hey, Z, Zamara says the best part of not knowing a solution to a problem. Yep. Anything becomes the solution, if you know what I mean. Exactly. Exactly. I think our job is to create the problem. Okay, you've got to get across the raging river. There's 5 party members and 15 NPCs plus laden down wagons or mules or something. It's dangerous. How do you get across? And then you just sit back and don't come up with the answer. Just how do you do it? Vampanoy says I lock doors to nowhere all the time. Oh, well, that's true. Everyone make a perception check. No one sees anything. Continue. Or just roll behind the DM screen for nothing and giggle. I've done that. That's always fun to just to mind game players. I've done that. I have done that. So I've actually done that when I've been stuck. I'm like, what the hell's going to happen next? I don't know. They took a left turn. I wasn't expecting that. Random, no meaning die rolls. Flip through book for random pages. All right, you smell something in the air. It's both pleasant yet dangerous. It's both you're both fearful yet safe. Thank you, Jordy. Alioop says there's more ways to skin a cat, metaphorically speaking. Hey, leave my cat alone. Um, yes, absolutely. And if we're open enough to allow people to solve situations creatively, then go for it. Listen, 3, 4, 5 people on the other side of the table are collectively going to be far smarter than I am. Why try to fight that? Instead of pushing and pulling against it, I say we embrace it. Let's see. During my hag campaign, um, during my hag campaign, killing a hag that controlled a region would spark a series of events. Their influence over a region for a long period of time meant that its loss would have equal magical effects. Yep, absolutely. We'll get into these others. Let's see. Going still with our co-hosts. Alley Oop says maybe that ogre should have waited till the pig was fully cooked. Oh man, projectile exiting out of both ends. Yep. Do a shot put with the smallest PC with the rope tied to them. Zip. Whoa. Yeah, in the future we're gonna call that a fastball special. All right, M squared says one thing I've started doing is doing travel checks in reverse. They all make a survival check for traveling. Then I ask the players, what hazard do you encounter that costs you 2d6 health? That's actually a good narrative way of doing a thing. Like, hey, listen, to get from A to B, it's going to be pretty dangerous. And there might be some losses, maybe lose some equipment, item becomes damaged, or whatever. Now you tell me how it is that you did or did not overcome the thing, right? Okay. Zamara says a good example right now from my game. Okay, my players found that there are some people legally being auctioned off. Wow, they want to free those people, but now they are deciding if they want to do it. Mm-mm-mm. Oh, if they want to do it the legal way, like by the people themselves, or the illegal way, okay, breaking them out. A good old fashioned breakout, and they are suffering from two exhaustion. Ooh, like do they rest? If they rest, that problem goes away. Um, offer inspiration for creative solutions, problems, or alternative resource costs. Well, that's exactly what inspiration in fifth edition was designed for. It's a reward for creatively engaging in the setting. If they come up with a great idea to cross that rickety rope bridge, and you go, "Wow, that's a good idea." Someone's like, "I've got plenty of rope. How about I reinforce the ropey bridge? I'm going to go across first and then tie it off, and then we're going to use that rope to reinforce it." And I'm going, "Oh, okay. Hey, we can't get across the ravine. I'm going to go. Is there a loose tree nearby? We're going to push the tree over and walk across the top of the tree because it can stretch across the ravine." Oh, okay. I didn't think about that, but yeah, that sounds good. You know, and then here's some inspiration. Sprinkle, sprinkle. You know, uh, Pelora says, getting players to make stuff up is great. Let the players have agency, frees up your mental space. Yep. Inject some energy, and they usually screw themselves up more than you would. Yeah, we come up with some great ideas and stuff. All right. So for the last two skills or techniques to use before we start before we start fudging dice are embrace the dice. And what do I mean by embrace the dice? Well, for one thing, we are playing a game and we decide to roll dice. And I find this rather, I understand the psychological reason behind this, but I do find it kind of funny that we dungeon masters and players will roll dice and then not like the dice and then want to change the dice instead of just embracing the fact that we decided to play the game in the first place. So we, if you roll the dice and they don't come in your favor, embrace the dice and create the narrative behind those dice. So an example would be my extremely charismatic character is going to go up to the king and convince the king to allow us to do go after the MacGuffin, and the king really doesn't want that to happen. And I roll the dice, and then I roll and I crit fail, and of course, a lot of times what happens, we like to make fun. Somebody crit fumbles, we. How about we not do that? How about we embrace the role, and as a player, go, you know what? I said the wrong thing. I brought up the loss of his son, or how about and we can be very creative. How about as I'm talking to the king, an aide walks in and starts speaking in the king's ear, and he just doesn't even hear me. He ignores me, or as I'm talking to the king, something falls out of my pocket, and I just look really embarrassed or something. Or like we could come up with a number of ideas, but let's embrace the die roll. Lastly, I'll give you an example, something that really did happen in a game long ago where someone um, crit attacked, rolled a 20, crit it, double damage, rolled the dice, and I think it was like this is BX or something. 1d6 for arrow to the throat, rolled 2d6 and rolled double ones. And I didn't want to go, play the music, dun 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 dun. Oh, failed. Instead, what happened was elf pulls arrow, boom, wants to shoot at the goblin chieftain or whatever it is, a hobgoblin chieftain or whatever. Arrow slices across the person's throat, boom, sticks into the back of the tree or throne or something like that, and was like, the player was like, says, you know what, I didn't do a lot of damage, and everybody was like, man, that sucks and whatnot. Instead, what we did is we reframed it, and the elf was like, hey, let us go, or the next one goes in your eye, right? And the chieftain, knowing that the arrow was like this close to killing him, was just like, oh my goodness. And we role played out like the chieftain would like told everybody to stand down, and the elf is just like, eagle-eyed, pointing at him, whatever. So we reframed the quote-unquote failure of the low damage high crit to be like, no, that crit meant something, even though the damage was low. And so we reframed the die roll. So in other words, let's embrace the dice and what they mean, rather than going folding our arms and pouting and going, I don't like what we rolled. Well, you decided to play the game. So how about we do that? Um, all right. You guys are talking about shot put versus hammer throws. Hey, the Olympics are coming up. We can have some pretty good ideas about what to do with ogres and halflings. All right, Polora says, which is a nice thing to do with crit failures and successes. They choose what they want to happen. No fudging needed. They're unlikely to kill themselves. Exactly, exactly. And with crit fail of fumbles and successes, I'd like to hand out things other than damage, sundering weapons, stunning people, capturing people, grappling, intimidating individuals, intimidating more than one individual. Like I like to hand out, like, oh, you got a crit. What were you trying to do? Well, I was trying to cut off the dragon's tail. Guess what? You cut the dragon's tail off, right? Does that mean you do more damage? No, but it takes away a weapon that the enemy may have. But yeah, I do that. Hey, I wanted to get on the dragon's back. Well, guess what? You crit succeeded. Yeah, you do it. I'm not. Don't roll for that. Mm-mm-mm. All right. Anyway, all right, co-host. Let's see. I don't want to get too far. Let you guys get too far along. Mike says, when I create puzzles, I'll often have no set response. I'll just stare blankly when the players discuss solutions. Yeah, me too. And I'll mentally pick which is best. This has two effects. Players, let's see. Players will pat themselves on the back for their genius, and the DM uses fewer brain cells. And also, sometimes I'm just not that smart. Honestly, not that smart. Ollie, you're so funny. It's three in the morning here, not fully awake. Yeah, I feel you. Now, maybe not 3 in the morning, but yeah. But thank you very much for being here. Unless my dulcet tones put you to sleep, which I guess is a benefit too. So, Deadman says, or you do like Tiny Tina did in the assault on Dragon Keep, creates a complex riddle, and no one knows the solution, so she just says, "Oh, just roll the die." Yeah, that ends up becoming a default too. Like, none of us know the answer. All right, fine, make an intelligence check. That happens a lot. Let's see. A underscore says, my players don't even need dice rolls to crit fail at talking to royalty. Sure, impersonating the dead father using the illusion magic that the prince hates was a great idea. Yeah. I'm going to use an illusion to take on the persona of the very person they absolutely positively hate. Yeah, that's a great idea. They're like, hell no. Mike says, I roll my dice openly. It creates drama and players pay attention. Exception, I use an elevated tray that the players cannot see into. This is used for player skills like perception and stealth, etc. I love this idea. Where players think they're hidden, etc. They still control the roll, but they know the result after I adjudicate. You know what? All right, let's stop right there because I was going to bring this up. The idea of rolling the dice and covering them, and I wish digital die rollers could do this, where you hit the digital die roller and like a black bar. It's covered up. There's a funny symbol over it or something like that, so like a dramatic symbol. You don't know what the die roll is. We role play out what you think is happening, like stealth, perception, persuasion, things where I, as the acting player, am convinced of one thing. Oh, of course I'm quiet. Of course I convinced the guard to let me in, and then reveal the dice and then see what happens, right? And that's the kind of thing I wish is a great technique to do when, of course, another idea some people have said, well, I roll for my players, and players don't like that. We love to have little polyhedrals. We love to have the little bally things in our hands and fiddle with them, right? It's dirty, yes, but everybody likes to mess with their dice. And so letting them roll the dice and then not knowing what the outcome is, it adds tension. And we get to, guess what? We get to role play even in combat, right? I'm going to sneak around behind the bad guy and do my sneak attack or something like that. Roll dice. Okay, hey Ranger, did you succeed in hiding in the woods? Maybe, maybe not. And then all of a sudden you realize that they crit failed, and then maybe there's some other evil bad guys literally standing behind the ranger who's sitting hiding in the woods, behind a tree with their your bow and arrow or their crossbow out or something. So absolutely, I love it. Alioop says the tail flops about. Anyone near it will get slapped or rolled over by that tail randomly, flapping around and stuff. I love that though. I like that idea. That's actually pretty cool. Yes, you chop off the tail of the dragon, and now the floppy tail becomes an environmental hazard on the battlefield. I love it. Okay, so embracing the dice. Okay. So, of course, I said embracing the dice for good or bad. And maybe there's something in between the good or bad of embracing the dice, right? Like, when a player describes that their sword gets knocked out of their hand and now they have to try to, grab for it, and both the orcs they're fighting and the hero are both scrambling to go jump for that magical sword that's still on fire. That's actually a great dramatic scene rather than, oh, I quit fumble. This game is stupid. Fold, pout. You know that can be kind of cool, and it narratively embracing the chaos of the thing that's happening is kind of cool, right? Like if a bad guy knocks a PC down with a crit hit, and we as a dungeon master are like, "Oh, I'm about to kill my player character with this next strike." Maybe narratively the bad guy, the orc chieftain, kicks the player down to the ground, and you just describe it. Okay, guess what? Instead of crit hitting you, they hit you, but you also get knocked prone, and he puts his foot on your chest, and he's like, "Everybody, in orchestra something, everybody stand down, or the halfling gets it or something, right?" And you could role play that out and go, okay, I saved the life of the player character, but I also put him in dire straits. Okay, that maybe you roll an attack roll and you cover it up, and the orc chieftain has a blade at your throat. What do you do? Now, that could be I could have rolled a 20, or I could have rolled a 3 as the dungeon master, right? You don't know, but there's a blade at your throat. What do you do? And you can start to role play these things out and embrace the die rolls, especially if they, like I agree with Mike, if they're hidden. So, yeah. All right. Z says, long one's coming. All right, here we go, co-hosts. Zamara says, a good example of that from one of my games. One of my players was picked up by a giant dragonfly and were about to be dropped from a bridge about 30 feet to the ground. Okay, I'm liking this. One of my players killed the dragonfly and tried to catch the player and failed. All right. Instead of having him just drop, the player caught him but was now sliding off the bridge. All right, all right. Sliding off the bridge themselves. That kept happening until the end of the final, until the end of the final player went, and they rolled a crit and pulled up 4 other people from falling. I like that. I like that a lot. Oh man! All right, Mike. Mike Gould's got to run. Severe thunderstorms last night. Ooh, ooh. But yeah, I love that. I love. You know what? A a critical failure is perfect to have somebody else caught in that tussle, the sliding down the long hill and somebody reaches them, or dangling off the rope bridge and somebody else grabs their forearm, is trying to hold on to them. So someone is knocked off of their mount, and the PC riding on the mount with them is trying to hold on to their ankle as they're being dragged on the ground or something like that. Like I love all that stuff. Thank you, Z. Yeah, yeah, hells yes. Hells yes. M squared says, you could, to emulate it online, roll 6d20s. Okay, okay. One of those is your stealth roll. Then when you come to reveal the dice, you roll a d6 and pick one of them. Shit, that's a great. That's a great idea. Because you in an electronic die roller, you could easily just put in like 60. How many d20s do you roll? Roll 6, click, and then start to describe what you're trying to do, and then boom, a d6. Yeah, I'd like that idea. Hold on, I got a slow clap. I'm really liking that, squared. Yeah. I, man, that's great. I'm liking that. I'm liking that. Anyway, to end end Zamar's thing about the players getting involved, although I can't imagine somebody pulling up four other people, but that's awesome. Zamar says, and actually cheering, an actual cheering payoff. My first one ever. I nearly DM ugly cried. I've wanted to DM ugly cry a couple of times. You're like, players, you made me feel so special. I love it. Oh my god! You know when the players like stand up and they're just like, yeah, they do the chest bumping and high fiving and stuff, and you're just sitting back with just like fingers laced, like, oh my god, that is awesome. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we have to make decisions on the fly, and our intention is not to hamstring, nerf. That's not our intention. Our intention is like, how do I make this exciting, right? And that's it. Yeah, if nerds like, I'm stealing that. Yeah, I'm stealing that. Oh, me too. Yeah, sorry, Michael Marin, I'm stealing that idea. That is awesome. That's a great idea. That's absolutely great. Plura says, rerolls are my bane. Uh-oh. Absolute bane, partly because my players have too many of them and I don't call for enough rolls to drain them off. The other side of fudging. Oh, yeah. It's the reroll. It's the roll the dice. You failed. Wait a minute. I have the ability to re-roll this thing. Roll. We'll get into that too. Michael Marin says if you get six low values, it might color their actions a bit. So maybe 10 d20s, but if you get a bunch of 11 and a 20 that you can physically see, the tension is higher than guessing probability. That's true. Oh, but get a bunch of maybe you meant ones, but either way, yeah, Ali, I'm with Ali. He's like me three. I'm stealing that. No, but I don't think you need to. I think it's sitting where it needs to, right? Because if it's a bunch of low rolls in like let's say 466s, right? 60/20s, I apologize. And you get a bunch of low rolls, great. Okay, then we all know, including the individuals, oops, I tried to sneak through the woods and I stepped on a tree branch and it snapped. You meant ones? Yeah. Right. So on one hand, the person who um is trying to commit the action and there's a bunch of low rolls, maybe that information is already given to them. I know I was loud. I know I said the wrong thing to convince the guard. I know I wasted too much time in the library looking at extraneous books when I should have been looking for the Necronomicon, right? Whereas if there's a bunch of like high low rolls and they're all over the place, then the wizard looking in the library may or may not find that book. Maybe you convince the guard and the guard pretends like he's convinced but actually calls over people to arrest you. Maybe you thought you were being sneaky and the people heard you anyway, but they pretend like they don't hear you and they, some hand signals and they surround you anyway, right? Like, so I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's perfect the way it is. And hand raised, I'm a thief as well. If anybody? All right. So lastly, let's end this off with, and we'll do a little summary, is here's an idea. Don't roll the dice. All right. How about we just not roll the dice at all? And I'm including combat in this. Yes, I'm including combat. In other words, if the players are like seventh level and they're surrounded by lowly zero level thugs in an alleyway, don't roll the dice. Hey, fighter who was drunk and slipped out of the back thing and you don't have your sword on you because you left it in the tavern and you have a knife, of course you can beat ass drunk with a single dagger against seven other thugs. Tell me how you take their asses out, right? Let's describe what's going on. Hey, wizard, of course you can find the book you're looking for because you're smart and you're book smart. Hey, cleric, yes, you get to speak to the head bishop or something of your religion because you're third level or something and you've progressed further in your studies. Don't roll the dice. How about if the players describe what they're doing, I'm going to I've got a pouch of powder, and I'm gonna pour it around the edge of the room and see if there's a secret door. Okay, well, there's air blowing under the secret door or something, right? That's don't roll the dice. If the players are sometimes I can hear people saying, well, if you don't roll the dice, what's the point? The point is you want your players to engage in your world. And if they are immersed in your world and they are engaging in the toys in your sandbox, that to me is enough reward to go, don't bother rolling the dice. Thanks for being creative and engaged in my world. Here's your reward for doing that. You decided to pour powder out of your bag and pour it around the corner. So of course you find the secret door. I'm not going to make you do all the interaction, roll the dice, fail the die roll, door's locked, now you never find it, right? Um, Pelor's like, this is why I don't call for enough rolls. Generally, things just aren't that important, and I'll just auto succeed when people have high base skills. I'm exactly. I am the exact same way. It's here's an example of how we don't die roll something. If you have the carpenter skill, do you make a die roll when someone builds a house? No. And why? Usually time, effort, and resources in a non-stressful situation are enough that you don't need to make a die roll. An example would be if police detectives are looking for clues and the PCs are there looking for clues. Well, if there's no time limit on them, yes, you find a clue. Maybe not as fast as you would like to, but of course you're going to lift up the behind the sofa and see the hidden thing, or there's a loose floor panel. Of course you find it. Hey, we're traveling. You know what? You make camp. Maybe there were bandits along the way. You scared them off. Maybe these things happen, but let's not bother with the die rolls. Hey, Ranger's like, I'm going to go hunt. Okay, you succeed in hunting, right? We have the option to not have people make a die roll. Uh, Michael Marin says, "Feel free to steal. I'm stealing, making players cover their dice in person to allow for big reveals. Yeah, why not? Why the hell not?" Yeah, Alley Oop says, "Yeah, barring progress can get boring unless rushed." Exactly. And lastly, I will say, and this is just a personal thing of mine. Both me and when I play with other people, I actually prefer dungeon masters to both set up the situation and end the situation. What do I mean by that? Um, I give up my agency to the dungeon master in the prologue and the epilogue. So an example would be, let's say we're coming to the end of the session. It's been 2.5 hours, guys. We're going to have to we're in the Underdark, and we're going to have to end the session pretty soon. I'm one who's very open for the dungeon master to go, okay, guys, you travel a few hours down into the Underdark or whatnot, and suddenly the drow elves bleeding out of the darkness as if they are made of one with the night, or even though it's there's no sunlight down there, surround you with their poisoned weapons and their arcane magics and say, who goes there? You are now the prisoners of Menzoberranzan in the house Thalicius or something like that, right? And maybe the next session starts off with us being captured. I am of the mindset that, okay, that's what happens. I'm not going to make a die roll. I'm not going to fold my arms and go, I should have got out of that because I'm better than blah blah. No, let the DM progress the game. Hey guys, next session, guess what? You're going to get on a sailing ship and go to a deserted island. I just purchased the Isle of Dread. Okay, all right. So next session, what happens? Well, you wake up on the beach because after a storm tossed your ship, you can see off into the distance. Your ship is sinking, and you're now on this thing. Right? Like, just let that happen. Zamara says, so what you are saying is, if there is no tension, there is no need for randomness, except for comedy, of course. Yeah, yep, yes, absolutely. Uh, if there's right, if the, what would be the reason for passing or failing a roll? And that's why I don't want players. I want players to get away from the idea of, hey, I'm going to pick up the dice and make a perception check. Whoa, slow down, slow your roll, because maybe there really is no need to make that perception check. Maybe if you're sitting in the open market and you look around, the dungeon master is going to say, oh, by the way, you also notice this thing, right? Instead of you rolling the dice, you know, fumbling it or something, not that even that matters, but you roll a 2 or a 4, and even with your bonuses, oh, it's a total of 6. And the dungeon master's like, well, thinking in her head, well, I was going to give them this information. And it feels like the dungeon master now is fudging dice. You rolled a 6, technically failing, but they give you the information anyway. And you're just like, well, I guess it doesn't really matter. Maybe not rolling the dice at all sounds a bit better. Thumblikius? I have no idea what you're saying, Alley-oops. I think you fell asleep on your keyboard. All right, so in summary, scaling dice rolls. So there's going to be automatic success, but depending on how high of a roll they make, you scale the die roll. Number 2, dials in the narrative, placing things in the narrative that allow us to regulate the combat, reinforcements, environmental effects, monsters, bad guys that are happen in stages. Like, stage 1, this happens. Stage 2, this other thing happens. Foreshadowing these dials as well. Knowing the PCs know there might be reinforcements. The PC knows that the vampire lord has a warlock patron. The PCs know that the demon can open up a portal to summon more demons or something. The PCs know that the ogre has runes upon its chest and left arm that allow it to garner some other special ability that the DM didn't really even have planned, but wanted to throw in there anyway, just to let the players know, right? Oh, geez, you talk about a dead brain. Marin's like, Thumblikius was the drow house you made up on the fly. You see how long the lifespan is of drow houses? I mean, in an instant they disappear. Psst, that's me talking out the side of my neck about how to, change the narrative so I don't look stupid. Anyway, we're going to get to that. Mike says, I agree that roll a lockpick check to pick the door when there's no tension is one of the easiest traps to fall into as a DM. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, like, why bother rolling? Now, there is a possibility when we have these failed rolls and success rolls, like, okay, lock picking. Maybe it's not just pick a lock or don't. Maybe a lock pick breaks, or the lock pick falls into the lock, or you drop the lock pick and it makes noise. So we have other options to do things with passes and fails if we want to add tension to it, if that's the point of it. Otherwise, nope, don't bother rolling. Of course you can pick the lock, right? You've got enough time to do it. Zamara says, who here as DM hasn't forgotten to give important information in their description and have been glad that a player asked to examine something? I've done that plenty of times. Like, you're just sitting like, I forgot to tell you about the dragon in the room. And everyone's like, really? How could you forget? Pelora says, this is why you need to make notes when you're making stuff up. Yeah. Otherwise, it's the end of House Thumblikius. Wow. The legendary House of Thumblikius. I mean, considering the long legacy of this house, for it to just disappear the way it did, I wonder. Yeah. Alex is like, I lost count. Marin says, I love you guys. Love the conversation. We'll let you get through your wrap up one day, DBJ. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave it on that. Thank you there, M Squared, Mr. Mike Marin, and everybody else out there. Thank you so much for being part of the show. I really appreciate it. I just love having the interactions. Next week, as I've mentioned before, some of you who haven't been here, next week, you guys are going to help me produce a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons product. It will become a PDF. It will become a physical print on demand object. I can't pay you. I can't pay you. I can promise that I can give you guys, if you're going to help in the writing process, that you'll get a PDF. They're easy, and I can hand those out. But you're going to help me write and produce something. I am a content creator. I kind of don't consider myself to be one, but and I don't mention it a lot, but I'm having a hard time finding space to write, and I still want to do the show. So I said, why not combine the two? So you guys are going to do that. Help me. So, yep. Everyone have a great one. And yeah, I see your comment there, Z. There you go. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And remember, an unwanted die roll is a chance to spice up the story with the spicy pepper of tension. Adding in there. All right, guys, have a great one. I will see thee tomorrow.